My name is Dan Dorval, and I'm President and CEO of Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. I am an independent certified financial planner and author of my book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Reality-Based Financial Planning for Mainstream America.
Hi, my name is Leah Woodley. I'm an associate financial advisor with Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. Our conversations discuss what it means to do quality of life planning in all areas of your life.
Dan, I'm so excited that your book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, is finally out. I wanted to talk about what originally inspired you to write the book 20 years ago.
Well, so the original book was written at a time where I had just started our first agreement and I was dealing with a lot of nurses. And I was getting a whole bunch of the same types of questions and where do I start? A lot of these people were very financially unsophisticated, and so they needed kind of very basic, how do I start? How do I do these different things? And so the idea came to me, there are a lot of books about financial topics. There's a lot of investing books, there's a lot of money-based books because people are interested in it. But there wasn't a lot of certified financial planner type books about how do you really do these things. So it's more of a, there were more general things. And then I think a lot of people would come to me and they'd say, well, I still don't know how this works. Well, so I wrote the original book thinking I want to give somebody a roadmap where they can go through and establish their goals. And then now I take those goals and I have a framework for how to implement them in a reasonable way that will improve the probability of accomplishing those goals. And so at the time, I didn't have that much experience as a financial advisor, but it was almost entirely the interactions I was having with nurses in order to create the entire book.
Yeah. And I love that it does provide that framework. It does provide you with a roadmap. So that is awesome. So when you went back to revise the book, what stood out to you the most about how personal finance has changed since when you first wrote the book?
Well, there's several things. Some of those things are more industry oriented, and then some of those things are more just personal planning from greater experience and the evolution of the financial planning world over that time. So back when I wrote the first book, I was still in that kind of conventional broker-dealer world where most people were being served by a representative, and it was a representative of a company typically, and most of the business was geared around selling products. I mean, that's just what it was. People would hire a financial advisor, the advisor might do planning, but the planning was generally to facilitate the sale of some sort of products. Might have been annuities, might have been investments, whatever it was, and then the advisor would get paid for the sale of product. Now, over time, the last 20 years, there's been a much greater focus or just kind of an evolution, a move towards the planning and the advice as being the greatest value as compared to the product itself. So back in the day, planning was used to facilitate the products, and the products were where the advisors got paid. And then over time, now it's more the planning and the advice is really the value itself, and products are just a puzzle piece that's part of the overall planning. So that's more of an industry type of perspective, and that did require some updates to the book. And then from this, personal perspective, I changed, it's still called Financial Success for the Rest of Us. That hasn't changed. But now it's this real focus on quality of life planning.
Yeah.
And over time, this experience with all these varied people, we've helped people from 6 different continents, we've helped people from all over the world, and, lots of different types of people. And so this, what resonated with me is how financial planning can really transcend those differences of cultural differences or maybe our lived experience of how we came up. Maybe I was raised with money, maybe I was raised very poor, and that impacts how I feel about money. Well, quality of life transcends all of that because it's your values and priorities and motivations that drive everything, not mine, not the average, not other people, not social media. And so we really want your quality of life to drive the decisions. And this is something most people really struggle with. So they don't think that way. We're kind of taught like they tend to think in terms of being part of a herd. You know, we evolved to be part of a group, a community. And so being part of the herd is, well, what does the average do? What do most people do? And we always remind them, well, we don't really care what most people do. In today's world, we care what you do. And so our advice and planning is really personal in that regard. And it starts with what you're trying to accomplish as that picture. And everything else from a planning perspective are puzzle pieces that then are put together as efficiently as we can to create that picture. And that's a big change to the book is that type of perspective from a quality of life, planning perspective.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And that is definitely true. We often get clients coming in and asking, well, what are most nurses doing? What are other people, how are other people investing? So you are absolutely right about that. And it is good to put things into perspective that your financial situation is unique to you. Now, we talked about changes. What parts of the original book still hold true today?
Well, a lot of the core foundational elements of planning don't change. So the hierarchy of cash flow that we talk about all the time, the first three levels are those foundational levels. And the foundation is making sure you get all of your matching funds from your employer if that's something that you have available. Second layer is paying off any high interest debt. And then the third layer is accumulating an emergency reserve. Those are such foundational elements that they literally go back to, I cite sometimes in some of my conversations a book called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it
Mhm.
talks about principles that for financial success back in like biblical days. And I looked at that when I first saw that book and I thought, well, it's amazing how much times have changed. And yet at the same time, just really good common sense principles remain the same. So that foundational aspect of financial planning, the lower levels of the hierarchy of cash flow, those really didn't change at all. How to structure your checking and savings accounts really hasn't changed hardly at all, even though you might now be doing everything online rather than 20 years ago, you probably didn't do everything online. So while things have changed significantly, those basic elements have stayed the same.
Yes, and that was actually one of the first books I've ever read on personal finance. So that's funny that you brought that up. So, as someone is reading this book, would you suggest that they read cover to cover and then take action, or would you suggest that they take action as they go? Because you do provide concrete steps on what people can do to help improve their financial situation. So, what would be your recommendation as the author?
I do think it's a little bit different depending on who's reading it. So yesterday we had a client come in, we gave him a signed copy of the book, and this client's getting close to retirement. And so there's a significant part of the book that really just doesn't apply to him. Now, it might apply to his kids, it might apply to other people he knows. But in his case, it's really, I highlighted certain sections where I'm like, okay, you could read these sections and then go to like the retirement income planning. And that's really going to apply to him at a personal level. If you are a younger person, which really is what the book is for, it's meant to give people anywhere from like their 20s through their 50s, but specifically younger generation that don't have access to independent certified financial planning in many cases, to give them that framework to be able to start to make decisions. In their case, I think what most people do, it depends how you learn, but most people will read the book and then you kind of get a whole set of the whole book and you might say, well, these things don't apply to me, these things do apply to me. And now I would encourage people to highlight those sections like this is where I need to start, and then I'm going to work my way up. And that's the hierarchy of cash flow. So
Yeah.
for a lot of people, maybe they're doing okay on the first couple layers, maybe they've got work to do somewhere else, and the book will show them how to take care of that layer and then move to the next layer. So I think it's something you're going to refer back to repeatedly rather than something where you just read the book and magically now everything just is there and you know exactly what you need to do.
Got it. That makes sense. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see everyday people making with their money that they would definitely benefit from reading your book?
Well, at a really core level, just a very basic level, it is that idea of setting your goals based on your own values and priorities. Because in today's world, it is so easy to get influenced by the noise of the world around us that we talk about all the time, social media and internet and friends, family, coworkers, all the different entities that are influencing you. And now we start to live our lives in a way that is not true to ourselves. So I might think I need to have this particular handbag, or I might need to have these clothes, or, if I'm not living in this kind of a house, I'm not financially successful. And it's so easy to get sucked into those things. And now maybe, we live a life of debt because we're trying to maintain this appearance and we just can't afford it. And, the houses 30, 40, 50 years ago, houses tend to be very small and very like they were used for a purpose, right? Bedrooms were very small. Maybe you had a bunch of kids and, trying to raise kids in a house, we didn't have a lot of space. And then houses got bigger and they got bigger and they got bigger and they added more components to them. And now people say, well, young people come to me all the time and say, I can't afford to buy a house. Well, I don't know what the answer is to that, but maybe part of it is you don't need a 3,500 square foot house.
Mm-hmm.
So I have other people who come to me and based on their values and their priorities, they're not worried about the Joneses and keeping up with the Joneses. They're worried about, okay, I can afford this house. It works for me. Yes, maybe someday we'd like to move into a bigger home or something like that, but they're buying a house that's half the price. And they're proud of the fact that they can actually do that. They're not
Hmm.
they're not in grievance mode saying, "Well, I can't buy a house." And
Right.
so really at a fundamental level, this book is to get people to think about what is the meaning and the purpose of the money that I have? What are the meaning and the purpose of the decisions I'm making around financial planning? And how do I find whatever my level of success is that I want to have in life? And getting you to think internally, intentionally about what you want to do rather than just being driven by the noise of the world. That's probably the biggest mistake I see over and over and over again. And it's a very difficult shift in perspective, from most people.
I love that. And you provided your own insight with your own family throughout the book, and that helped to reiterate that point that you just said about just making sure you're prioritizing your own values and motivations and goals. You gave us some insight and a look into what you were thinking about as you were preparing your own plan for your own family. So that was wonderful as well. So I know writing and revising this book has been a journey for you. What do you hope readers take away after finishing reading this revised edition?
Well, yeah, it was a big chore, and you certainly helped through that process with some of the editing process. It was a lot different than the first time that I did it. We did this through Amazon, through Kindle Direct Publishing, and it was definitely a more challenging process. The first time I just had an independent publisher, gave them the manuscript, and they pretty much did everything. In this case, it was a little bit more difficult. But my hope is that we can only influence so many people through personal financial planning. We can only meet with so many people. We only have so much capacity to make change in the world around us. And my goal with the book is that now, whether it's one person or 1,000 people or 100,000 people or 1,000,000 people, they now have access to that mind, that perspective of an independent certified financial planner to start to think through decision making. And if they make one decision better because of the book, and now it impacts their quality of life in a maybe a profoundly positive way, that will have made all of that effort worth it, for us.
Awesome. Well, if you are interested in getting the book is available on Amazon.com. It is called Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Quality of Life Planning for Mainstream America. So go check it out. Anything else you want to add there?
Well, I think one of the things too is as people work through the book, and you talked about I used my family as the example. If you follow these steps and you work your way up, and now you're maybe at the top of that hierarchy and you've kind of done all the things, right? Inevitably, you're somebody who probably is task oriented. You're probably good at accomplishing those steps. And then people come to us and they go, well, what's next?
Mm.
What more? We have a society that's like, well, what more? And that's where our family is now. So we went through raising our kids. We went through financing education. We have different insurances. We've saved and accumulated for retirement. We're in great financial shape. We're completely debt free. And so we sit and we talk about, well, what's next or what's more? And we don't really know. And that's okay. But it feels weird to be in a position where if you've reached that level, that is your financial success. And yet, for some people, it almost feels somewhat unfulfilling because, well, I want to know what more there is. And we're kind of, again, that we're told that that needs to be the case. And so, again, for those readers who they do a great job of following all those processes and follow the framework, it's okay not to need more.
Yes, I love that. Well, until next time, have a good one.
Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.